We will now have approval of the minutes of the, superintendent's report, my bad. Superintendent's report is, in action if, as necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Our first report this evening is actually a follow-up from our previous meeting in December. I'm going to ask our Director of Finance to come forward, Ms. Connie Frick, and she'll make the introductions of our team members that are here tonight to follow up for the board. Ms. Frick.
Good evening, everybody. We have representatives from Burkett CPA firm. The audit partner, Matthew Hodges, is here tonight, and also Zach Buchanan, who is the audit staff. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hodges.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Before I address our firm's procurement examination for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020, I'd like to take a moment to update you on the results of our financial and compliance audit for fiscal year 2020. We have finalized our financial and single audit of the fiscal year 2020 CAFR. The OMB released its compliance supplement addendum for the COVID-19 funding on Tuesday, December 22nd, 2020. We performed tests of the district's compliance with the requirements laid out in this addendum for the Coronavirus Relief Fund and the ESSER Fund. And on January 14th, 2021, we issued our final audit reports, which contain clean opinions on the district's financial statements, internal controls, and compliance with 3 major federal awards. So now I would like to present to the board the results of our firm's procurement examination for the year ended June 30th, 2020. Our procurement examination covered the district's internal procurement operating policies and procedures during the period from July 1, 2018 through June 30th of 2020. We were required to and did perform our procurement examination in accordance with the school district procurement audit procedures, which are prescribed by the state of South Carolina's State Fiscal Accountability Authority, their Division of Procurement Services Office of Audit and Certification, as updated on April 28, 2020. The procurement examination included sampling as required by the school district procurement audit procedures. That sampling included our review of a 2-month sample of procurement card purchases for each fiscal year. We reviewed a block sample of 200 numerical purchase orders to check for splitting of vendors, favored vendors, and any questionable procurements. We selected a sample of 10 disposals and sales of surplus property. That was 5 from each fiscal year. We also selected a sample of 68 procurement transactions. That included 36 from fiscal year 2019, as well as 32 from fiscal year 2020. That sample included 7 items selected that were greater than $500,000, 36 that were randomly selected based on strata, which included 14 greater than $50,000, as well as 25 random from the entire population, which included 1 greater than $50,000. So that was 22 purchase orders greater than $50,000. Those 22 selected represent approximately 41% of the population based on dollar amount of those items that were above $50,000. We also selected 5 procurements relating to major construction, as well as change orders from any construction projects. And we reviewed 100% of sole source and emergency procurements from July 1, 2018 through June 30th of 2020, as well as unauthorized procurements from July 1, 2018 through June 30th of 2020. In the December board meeting, there was a question regarding item 3 of our procurement examination report, which dealt with minority business enterprise plan utilization, particularly comparing goals to results. So section 11-35-5240 of the South Carolina Consolidated Procurement Code, as well as section 5240.1.3 in the district's procurement code, includes goals for spending with minority businesses of at least 10% of the district's total dollar amount of funds expended. The total dollar amount of funds expended is defined as the total dollar amount in which the district has discretion or influence in the selection of a private vendor. Following the state's guidance, expenditures in general ledger accounts for the following charges are excluded from the total dollar amount of funds expended. I'm not going to read all of the categories to you, but the major items include payroll, fringe, utilities, travel, insurance, interest, payments to public entities, payments to vendors on statewide and district contracts, payments to vendors based on sole source and emergency justification, as well as payments to vendors exceeding $10,000 that have been competitively solicited or quotes were solicited. So for fiscal year 2019, the district's minority vendor expenditures were $1,182,320.23, compared to total expenditures of $536,487.85 for a minority business enterprise utilization percentage of 8.7%. So that was below the district's goal of 10% for fiscal year 2019. For fiscal year 2020, the minority vendor expenditures were $1,197,629.14, and that compares to expenditures of $11,494,833.41 for a minority business enterprise utilization percentage of 10.4%. So it did exceed the goal for fiscal year 2020. Also, in the December board meeting, there was a question regarding whether a contract with Dan Neal was a sole source and emergency contract. As part of our procurement examination, we reviewed copies of all sole source and emergency procurements, and the contract with Dan Neal was not listed. We did receive a copy of the contract with Dan Neal dated August 1st, 2018, which, based on our conversations with management, was treated as falling under the other professional services exemption. Lastly, in the last board meeting, the board approved a motion for our firm to list all contracts over $50,000 during the period and whether they met the procurement code requirements. So we wanted to follow up on this action, first of all, by providing clarity in regards to the procurement examination requirements and services that were already performed by our firm, to ensure that the board is aware that we are not, in fact, required to review supporting documentation for all purchase orders in excess of $50,000. Furthermore, we wanted to clarify that this request is outside of the scope of our contract to provide financial audit and procurement examination services. In order to perform the requested services, we will need to enter into an additional contract with the district for an agreed upon procedures engagement. And in order for our firm to review all purchase orders over $50,000, we will need to inspect supporting documentation for 222 purchase orders. These are the items that we have not already inspected as part of our procurement examination. Due to the more rigorous requirements of purchase orders over $50,000, we believe that it will take two of our staff approximately 2 weeks or 160 total hours to inspect the supporting documentation for these purchase orders. We will have additional time documenting and reporting upon the procedures performed and results obtained, as well as time reviewing the documentation prior to report issuance. This time will be invoiced at our hourly rate of $115 for additional work, as stated in our proposal dated March 26, 2019. And as a result, we anticipate that our expected costs for performing this engagement would be in excess of $20,000. As far as the timing of this work, we would coordinate performance of the procedures and issuance of our report in conjunction with our existing client commitments due to logistical concerns of the time of year, and this being a very busy time of year for not only our firm but all CPAs. So this concludes our response to the questions previously raised by the board regarding our procurement examination. I'll be happy to address any additional questions you may have at this time.
Ms. Huddle?
I have several questions. First of all, you said that the contract for Dan Neal was in the other professional services category. I think we asked that you also determine whether or not it was properly approved under was it properly approved under that category?
So again, because that was not selected in our procurement examination, We're not able to say at this time
Okay.
whether or not that's been properly approved. We would have to be engaged.
All right, second question. In the last meeting, I don't remember if it was you or another representative said in the meeting that you had reviewed 100%. So you did not tell us that accurately?
Again, I wanted to be here tonight to correct that, and I do apologize for the
Okay.
misstatement on my part.
Okay.
We
That's
do,
all right. Okay.
it is a sample, yes.
So third item, so your audit method to review $50,000 or more contracts would be to pull the purchase orders?
So we pull the purchase orders and select any, that's the method for selecting those.
Okay.
And then we inspect the supporting documentation.
What happens if there's not a purchase order? Isn't that part of the audit to make sure there is a purchase order?
Sure. Again, our examination is performed in accordance with the state of South Carolina's guidelines.
So that's
And
their
that's the
guidelines?
method, exactly. That's the method that they prescribe
Do you
and that we have to
believe-
perform.
Okay. Do you think that's a good way to do it?
Well, it's the
I'm just
best way,
asking for an
it's the best
opinion.
way that we know. It's the best way
So
that we
you
know.
wouldn't go to the disbursements register and say, we paid $50,000 to see if we have, because otherwise, if
We
we don't have a
separately-
purchase order, you're never going to see it, right?
The purchase, the purpose of the procurement side, the procurement examination is to conform to the state's requirement. I think what you're asking about is more on the financial audit side and looking at a sample of items and then going from there. So on the financial audit side, we do look at a sample of transactions based on checks that clear the bank, and then we go into that supporting documentation as you're
Okay,
mentioning.
thank you.
Mr. Lovelace?
Yes, sir. My question goes back, and it's very simple, goes back to the minority business enterprises that I asked you about the last time.
Yes.
I noticed on there that we had a lot of woman-owned business enterprises that are not the same as the minority business enterprises. Woman-owned business can be, you know, a woman of Caucasian descent or something like that. But anyway, my question is, when you calculated, according to the procurement code, it says minority business enterprises. Were those percentages you gave us solely for minority businesses, or did they include minority and woman-owned?
Linda, let's see. Linda Robinson for procurement actually derived that calculation, so I'm going to let her answer that question.
Thank you.
And for the audience, Ms. Robinson, when you get to the microphone, would you make sure everyone knows your position in School District 5? Because we don't want to create the confusion that you're an employee of the auditing firm. So if you will share your name and title for everyone that is watching this evening, but also for the board to be introduced to you that may not have met you yet.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. My name is Linda Robinson, and I am the coordinator of procurement for the district. And Mr. Levis, in answer to your question, the minority vendors that were included in the report were minority vendors certified by the South Carolina Certified, and it could include either if they're certified, and that's what we used.
So it includes the women-owned businesses and the minority businesses, both of them?
Correct.
Okay.
But
Okay, that's what had me, you know, because I read the thing and separated the two out, and that's why I was trying to come up with the percentage. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? Any questions? Thank you so much, and thank you from Burkett.
Mr. Hodges, thank you for that presentation, and thanks to Ms. Frick and her team. To make sure that we were prepared for this evening, this team went back and reviewed the last board meeting of the excerpt of the video and received the questions that the board submitted. So thank you to the board members for all the questions so that they could be properly prepared tonight. Our next presentation, actually we have a presentation for the board to see. You have a copy of that in your board packet from me. Mr. Cannon, our Director of Facilities, is here so that he can provide our typical update of capital projects. And in this, of course, we have an update of a question that was asked by the board at a previous meeting several months ago. Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. Chairman Hammond, members of the board, it's my pleasure tonight to present to you capital update for the fiscal year 2021. Just a snapshot of, just to remind you, so last March, this board approved capital projects out of our $10 million capital program. It included 3 projects that we took on this past summer, as well as 2 additional projects carried over from the previous year. Starting out, Harbison West Elementary, we did an HVAC replacement, 22 units of the classroom and kitchen areas. We replaced ceiling tile, repainted ceiling grid, and all our common areas being hallways, cafeteria, gym, media center, front office, things of that nature. New LED lighting in all of these areas. We infilled, the media center had a recessed sort of small mini amphitheater that we infilled just to give more floor space. We replaced some kitchen equipment. We installed an ADA lift for access to their arena. And then we also replaced their theater backdrop wall. Just some pictures of that work. Top left would have been the media center during construction during the summer. Bottom left would have been where the media center got infilled, and then picture to the right would be the completed product of that infill. The 2 pictures to your left would be where we installed the ADA lift to get anyone in a wheelchair or needing access down to the theater. And again, to the right, that would be one of our common areas outside the cafeteria where we replaced the ceiling grid and new LED lighting. Nursery Road, we had almost exact similar scope, with the exception of we didn't quite do the new kitchen equipment. Nursery Road already has an ADA lift to their theater, so we did not have to include that scope. But outside of that, it was almost the exact scope of Harbison West. Some pictures here inside the arena, or the theater, excuse me. You can see the top left, you can see the old frosted glass. I think back in the 80s when the school was built, things were projected to that glass for performances and things of that nature. And so it's kind of out of date, out of time. And so the bottom right would be replacing that theater backdrop. Again, the cafeteria with new LED lights, ceilings. On the right would be a new dishwasher, and the bottom left would be the media center infill. At Irmo Middle School, we had some really old canopies that were outside, so we demoed those, put new pre-manufactured aluminum canopies, new LED lighting with those canopies, and then we did the roof replacement in our 7th grade wing and roof recovery of that entire building. Again, some pictures on the top would be kind of a before, top left, right would be during roof replacement, and then the bottom picture would be one of our new canopies. And then many of y'all are familiar with the canopy that goes over the pond at Irmo Middle. This would have been a before, top left, and after, bottom right. Irmo High West Wing. The West Wing has had construction going on the last few summers. So we completed the HVAC replacement on West Wing number 4, and also on the 3rd floor of what we call the attendance building. We replaced ceiling tile and grid in those areas. We do new LED lighting in the 2nd and 3rd floor of the attendance building in West Wing number 4. And in this building you're in tonight, we replaced the boilers. Again, some pictures here. Top left would be pictures of the HVAC replacement, and top right would be kind of post-construction. Bottom left would be new boilers down below where we stand tonight. And then the bottom right would be new units on West Wing number 4. Dutch Fork High was a continuation of 1819 project where the remainder of the roof at Dutch Fork High, if you're looking at the picture to your left, you see a dark roof area. So essentially it was all those areas that got replaced this past summer. Of course, the picture on the right is a picture of the new roof. Other projects we took on this fall, here at the Media Center, Irmo High, we did an HVAC replacement. We completed that in November. Dutch Fork Elementary, we replaced the HVAC of the cafeteria. Oak Point Elementary, we replaced their bathroom counters and all their gang bathrooms. In the Chapin High Gymnasium, we added a new concession window that we completed just before basketball season. Fund balance transfer. If you recall, part of our capital budget approval was to take a portion of the general fund excess and use that toward capital projects. The final amount ended up being a little over $2.8 million. The things we've completed to date, so our elementary school playgrounds, all of our playgrounds, we replaced the fall surface. That was a little over $500,000. We've done seal coating at, I think, 7 or 8 campuses. We do have some paving projects coming up later this spring that will be using additional money from that account. Flooring replacement, I think we did 8 schools. We went in, and most of that was we're taking out old carpet, putting in new tile. Many of our elementary schools, of course, eating in classrooms now, and so we tried to go to each one of these schools to get tile in just to help with the ease of cleaning. We've done a number of fencing security gate installations across 7 of our campuses. And this is kind of a snapshot of where we are with that fund balance transfer. I will tell you, back at the fall, Mr. Richardson at that time, we made a consensus to kind of put a hold. Didn't know where we were going with COVID, didn't know what funds would be needed. So we put a hold on some of our projects. You see what we've spent to date. Parking lot lighting project we've got at Chapin Elementary, we just awarded. Crossroads Intermediate, we're working on intercom upgrades now. Chapin Elementary, we are presently bidding their ADA lift to their arena. So at this moment, we've got a little over $1.5 million of that fund transfer money, but again, that will be spent over the next upcoming months. At this time, I will pause to see if we've got any questions on our capital project update.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah,
Mr. Lovelace?
I've got several. I know I talked to you about this, but the Watt-Miser panels at Chapin High School
Yes,
were
sir.
energy control or energy management system. That we found to be, I think the panels had been stripped out and they put in time clocks.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then we have Siemens with a new set of panels going in.
And I will, Mr. Lovelace, I'm fixing to give you an update on some of your Chapin High questions.
Okay, well, let me move on then.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we had talked about with ASHRAE and the air changes per hour and the health during COVID that we, if we bring in more makeup air and so forth from the outside.
Yes, sir.
Did we max that out so that we could get more external air coming in? Do we have any kind of waiver that we could do that?
So what we're doing, we went in and adjusted all our HVAC run times where we're doing a pre-flush, post-flush each school day. So we essentially adjusted all our HVAC systems to come on 2 hours earlier than previously and then 2 hours later than previously. So we're trying to do a number of air changes before and after the school day.
Well, my question was on this new, I noticed that you have some new air conditioning equipment and all in here. Okay. Are we doing anything with that new equipment that's different from what we did pre-COVID so that we can, we can capture, more efficient equipment as far as that's concerned?
So in most cases, we are doing a one-to-one replacement. However, a lot of the older equipment didn't have features like dehumidification, things of that nature. So the new equipment does have, of course, more features than the equipment. Most of the equipment we are replacing are 21 to 22 years old.
Okay. And my final question is, I know the only contract that this board has been able to review was the one for elementary school number 13. Okay. And I saw some large dollar amounts in there.
Sure.
Is it? And I just want to, just ask you, why don't we get to see those contracts? I know we see the budgeted amounts that you present every year, but we don't actually get to see the contracts before they're let to the construction contractors. So is that, I know you were new here.
That's something
I'd
be glad to share.
Either probably, but I was just wondering, could we make that?
Sure.
Could you present those to us so we could look at them?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Huddle?
I see there's on the budget, the capital budget update, there's a technology line with $3 million in it. Can you give us an idea of what's included in that?
I cannot, to answer your question. I tell you what I can do. I can ask Ms. Garris at our next update to give you a technology fund update.
That would be fine.
Yep, sure.
You going to your Chapin?
Yes, ma'am. Let me see if this, Rachel, can you, okay.
Okay. I have a question while we're waiting. It seems like we are so often having to replace, and I can imagine because of our moisture and the climate we have, our HVAC systems. Seems like that's always coming around. Is there an average life expectancy for, like, you know, a brand-new unit? Does it last about 20 years?
It has to in this district. 15 years what's recommended, and usually we're trying to replace them by the time they hit 20 years.
I can remember from years ago, and Mr. White might remember, I remember it was like on a rotating basis, and you had it pretty much figured out.
That's correct. That's
But
correct.
I do know it's something that's always needed over and over.
Absolutely. So to update this board, back in, I think it was one of the October board meetings, we had a few questions on the Chapin High bond construction update. Of course, Chapin High had a major bond project, I think through the years 2013 to 15 was the duration of that construction. So I wanted to bring an update on answers to those questions tonight. One of the questions were brick pointing issues. Again, this was prior to my time, but it turns out there was an issue with the stone coping cap joints. What that essentially is on top of the new construction, go to the very top of the wall, there's stone precast units. And between that stone, you have joints that have mortar joints. As you can see here, this was a typical condition of what was found back in 2018. We were having some roof leaks, it's my understanding. It got tracked to this where we were just having mortar deterioration. So in 2018, the district spent almost $58,000 to repair these joints on those stone caps. Mr. Lovelace, to your question previously, so energy management controls. Doing my homework, our district has full control of the HVAC units at Chapin High School. There was an issue with the exterior lighting controls. It's a lighting system called Watt Stopper. Essentially what that is you can control lights remotely through an energy management system. Sometime 4 to 5 years ago, the district went in, removed the Watt Stopper, and put in time clocks to bypass that control system. We are in the process. Palmetto Controls manages our lighting controls with a Siemens DeSego system, Mr. Lovelace, as you referred to. So we're presently converting that exterior lighting controls to Siemens at the approximate cost of $12,600. The other question was shared conduit. Just in my research, we were able to come across 3 issues that we were made aware of. First being our exterior lighting controls just addressed. The second issue was the power supply to some exterior light poles by the tennis courts was apparently cut during construction. Don't know where, don't know how. We did have new poles installed prior to winter break, so we now have lights to that parking lot adjacent to the tennis courts. The third issue we were made aware of is the science teaching cabinet did not have power installed to them. Conduit was in place, but there was no power pulled to the electrical outlets in the teacher cabinets. Our district staff, we've addressed a couple of these and are slowly working to get power to these teacher cabinets. The district electricians, previous administration I talked to, were not aware of any shared conduit. Now, I will tell y'all, there are probably miles of conduit at Chapin High School. So for me to stand here and tell you there's not shared conduit, we're not aware of it is the best answer I can give you. And as far as we know, everything in the school electrically is functioning properly. This time, I'll accept any questions on the Chapin High. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Mr. Lovelace.
This was, can I have the floor?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. This was, well, related to but we have this Wattmizer or something equivalent to Watt Stopper, or equivalent in all of the new schools that we have renovated or built since the 2008 bond referendum, right?
It is at Chapin Middle and Spring Hill High. I am aware of those two. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I was told that they put it in this building, but anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
The point is that, you know, I'm looking for opportunities. I'm looking for opportunities to save money so that we can, you know, we don't need to be paying Dominion when we don't have to, or you know, whatever. But I would like to revisit, because from what I heard from some engineers, that those systems, while they were installed, they weren't programmed properly, or they weren't, and this is no fault of the district, but they weren't made operational. And I wanted to make sure, I was told that on this structure right here, that we could save, somewhere in the neighborhood, and this is just estimates, so don't hold me to it, but somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 a year, which equivalates to maybe a couple of FTEs. What I was trying to, determine is could we look at the other buildings that are in our district and determine are those working properly, and if they're not, maybe it would be some small amount of money like $12,000 like at Chapin that we could spend to save a bunch over the years. And
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's the opportunity that I was looking for. So.
Sure.
Mr. Cannon, if I may insert there, Chair Hammond, Mr. Beanbo, Ms. Frick, and I recently had a meeting with the State Department of Education regarding the new federal funds that will be coming down. We're going to call them ESSER 2 funds. We are awaiting a technical assistance training for our staff. Early February, we're told. One of the they've called them buckets before, there were 12. This time there will be 15. And that does include facilities to include things with air quality, of course, because of the COVID-19 effect. So as we're doing this, if that becomes of interest, we can certainly investigate that. And we'll have the opportunity to use capital funds, of course, that are earmarked in School District 5, and then funds like this now that we could use that's available to School District 5 to maximize our efforts. So Mr. Lovis will make note of that to make sure when we do have that technical assistance webinar, we can follow up with that appropriate question.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. White?
A couple of points, or a couple of questions. And let me just start with the electrical issues. Tell me what's the issue with shared conduit again? You said you're not aware of any. That's your last point.
One of the questions was, is there shared conduit at Chapin High School? Our district electricians that I spoke with are not aware of any. So, as far as we know, everything is...
What would be the implications of having shared conduit?
Sometimes if you have electrical power and low voltage together, it will short out one of the components, anything feeding from low voltage.
So it's not a desirable...
No, sir,
system.
not at all.
Okay.
No.
The power was cut during construction. Was that the renovations in 2012 or 13?
Yes, sir.
So, and you just discovered that when?
Well, when I started asking questions, and I actually talked to the previous facility supervisor who was there at the time. He said, yeah, those poles, there's 3 poles. He said those have not worked since 2012.
So nobody's bothered to figure that out since 2012. And I know you weren't here,
yeah.
but it seems like if we're talking about, and you weren't here when we did the resolution
Correct.
with these contractors, but I was here, and I remember very clearly, we sent out requests, everybody, board members, the principals, everybody, report everything that does not appear to be functioning. So if we're just now coming to evaluate something that is over, 8 years or 7 or 8 years ago, then we've kind of not done our job, because there was a time period we could have confronted the people.
Sure.
I was part of the board then, and I've listened to stuff that we've wasted millions of dollars, but we had people that went in and corrected everything that was known to be defective. So if we're just learning about this in 2020 or 21, then there's something that broke down on our side by not reporting it and it being able to go into that arbitration where these things were resolved. The other one is the energy management controls. And the same question, was this Watt Stopper exterior lighting control, was it defective over time? Was it defective, was it improperly installed? And the same question is this a defect that occurred after construction, or is this something related to improper installation or improper planning or improper design?
I think the main thing that I gathered, and again, this is talking from previous personnel, Watt Stopper was kind of a new system when it went into Chapin High School and our other schools. The facility supervisor was there at the time, got a one-day training on it. And so I think it was more of just proper training on how to use the system. It turns out I made numerous calls about Watt Stopper. There was just not a technician in the state of South Carolina that knew how to operate Watt Stopper at the time. And so Again, I think a lot of it had to do with proper training on how to use the system.
And let me go back to the electrical again. I meant to ask this one. It said, science teaching cabinets do not have power installed to them. Conduit had no power pulled.
Correct.
That's been left undone for 7 years too?
Yes, sir.
No, so nobody, that's, again, if we can't report and find stuff that wasn't done, then it's hard to say that,
Yep.
we had an opportunity to rectify this.
Agree.
back in-
Mr. Cannon, if you don't mind, Ms. Hammond, if you don't mind,
I don't.
some of the questions, Mr. Cannon, remind me, when did School District 5 employ you?
September of, I guess, 19?
So because of that, some of the work that we're doing, and mind you, this administration was not in place then, so the interviews that Mr. Cannon has done to try to get to the place that we could provide this report were based upon questions from October. So some of the questions that may be asked, it may warrant further review.
Sure.
This is what Mr. Cannon and his team have been able to find out, not in an inquisitive way of concerns or punitive, but in a way of curiosity, to try to get information and get grounded with this. So, Ms. Hammond, maybe it would help us to hear some of the questions, and Mr. Cannon, we're not putting you in the spotlight to answer questions if you were not here in 2012. And because of that, we want to make sure that we collect questions that you could follow up on, and that may require you to use some outsource to go back and look at contracts, to go back and look at completed tasks, and anything else that may have gone into all those legal things that were happening in School District 5 that you were not involved with, and that time I was in a different capacity myself. So, Ms. Hammond, I'm not quite sure how we could collect some of these questions, but I want to make sure that the board is reminded Mr. Cannon was not in his position at that time, but we definitely need to have the opportunity to review and find out answers to be accountable to the board because of the taxpayer money that these projects take, of course.
I've got one more question on this
Mr. White,
presentation. And I don't disagree with that. I'm responding to accusations
Yes, sir.
that there was work left undone, and reality-wise, this a 34, 35, or $38 million renovation, and you're less than $100,000 of what might be considered punch list items that people did not properly gather and communicate, and we're 8 years later. So it doesn't sound like the magnitude of there were major things left undone, and this is clearly not millions of dollars of stuff that we're fixing that was not properly dealt with in that arbitration. That's the issue that I'm asking questions about. But the brick pointing, what does this mean here? Was this defective construction? Was it, I know this is not the first place that's had roof repairs later. A lot of times you come back and you see something was faulty installed or whatever, but what's the ramifications of finding this?
Again, I would speculate, just because I wasn't here in 2018. Obviously, if mortar only lasted 4 years, to me, it was an inferior product that got put as part of the mortar. Beyond that, I didn't put my eyes on it. I just going through the files, that's what we found.
Mr. White, I think based on what Dr. Melton told us, these are questions, they are good questions, they need to be answered. But I think in fairness to Mr. Cannon, we need to maybe send these questions to me, which I will give to Dr. Melton, and she will deliver to you, and then you could be prepared
Sure.
to help answer the questions instead of putting you on the spot tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Could we come up with a date that those may be due
A
by?
date?
If we could have a date that those would due by, that would help Mr. Cannon and team. So I'll leave that up to the board to decide. And I do want to ask Director of Technology, Ms. Garris, because there was a question, I believe, from Ms. Huddle earlier, and because Ms. Garris has been involved with planning for this presentation, I think she may be able to answer a question that Ms. Huddle asked previously. Director Cannon, thank you.
You have a question?
Can I ask Director Cannon a quick question?
Yes, go, Ms.
I was just curious, since we're building a new school, typically, what kind of warranty would we get with either a brand-new school or with major repairs, or major renovations, such as what was done at Chapin?
It varies. So a general contractor will obviously warranty anything of their work for a year, but you have different warranties. For instance, roofs are 20-year warranties. HVAC's often like 3 years on parts. So it just depends on what system. But as far as for general construction, we get a 1-year warranty that is on that contractor to repair anything that's wrong.
So if these similar things were to happen at Piney Woods, it would be on us to find those within a year? Or
Yeah.
like the brick pointing, if it was 4 years and it should have lasted 10, do we have any recourse?
Again, it depends on the system or product. Yeah, it just varies. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
unfortunately, sorry.
Okay? And we will, did you need her to,
Yes, ma'am, I think
Yes.
Ms. Huddle had a question earlier. Ms. Garris, I don't know if you had a chance to record the question or if you'd like Ms. Huddle to ask the question again, but I understand that you're prepared.
Yes, I
She's
prepared off the top of my
always
head,
prepared.
so how about that? I think, Ms. Huddle, correct me if I'm wrong, your question was just how we spend capital money that's designated to technology.
Yeah, it was the $3 million, and not every penny, but just kind of in general.
Yeah,
with
and
that
I can give you that,
course.
and I can give more detail later if so requested, but just as a general, so you understand what comes out of capital, the big ticket items we have are Chromebooks and cases, which we provide to students and staff. And we do a refresh every year of a certain percentage of those, so that's a big cost. The other one is laptops, and desktops was always a budgeting category, which we've actually reduced. Desktops are tremendous. COVID taught us we have to be mobile, so a lot of people who always like their desktop, we're switching over. So a large number of laptops to replace aging laptops that our teachers have needed, and some desktops. Smart boards for the classroom, projectors for the classroom, and some, even like in this room, new projectors and screens and such. Things you don't see, like security cameras, we have increased those tremendously. Those require not just the cameras, but cabling and servers that go with them. That all comes out of capital. We're currently working on replacing wireless access points in every location. So we're doing that currently. Other infrastructure things that nobody sees but are really important, like cabling, I mentioned servers, network equipment like network filters, things like that. All of that is what comes out of our capital money.
is
Ms.
that
Huddle,
good?
was that sufficient to what, okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we knew you were always prepared.
Thank you.
Okay, I will move on for approval of the minutes of the December 14th, 2024.
Ms. Hammond, I had one third item. I know this report's taken a minute, but,
Oh,
for-
I am, sorry.
Yes, ma'am, that's
That is
okay.
my bad. That is
So
very
as we
important.
pull up, for context for everyone, I've been consistent to provide updates to the board and of course for the community to hear. And with each time we update the Roman numerals. So this is part 10 as far as our updates regarding reentry. And of course, this has been throughout the academic year of the 2021 school year. You're not going to see new content here, but I will just give you the overview. These 5 principles have been our parameters as how we as a staff have been making recommendations and planning for the operations of this school year from early last summer throughout the late spring and into the fall, and of course up until now. These 5 principles all have a different purpose and a different lens into the operations of School District 5. This next slide is one that we have shown many times before. The different portions of this is, of course, there's a variety of data points that we use. Within operations, there are different components to the operations of how we are making decisions in School District 5, and then, of course, there's the input. How are things going? How are we working towards the operations of School District 5, all with the underlying emphasis of priority number 5. And for those that don't know the 5 priorities that I have had that this board has supported in my goals, that's captured for you here to see for our students and our staff to feel safe physically, emotionally, and also socially. Now, some could easily argue, how does anyone feel safe in a health crisis of a pandemic such as we're operating with now? And I don't say that with sarcasm, I say that with responsibility. It is of great importance to me as a superintendent of this district to look through the lens as to how are we operating for the success of our staff, for the operations of School District 5, and of course always for the wellness of our students and the impact that our students have in our community. So with that, here are some of the phases that we have worked through since the start of this academic year. You're going to see the same information for the first few phases. You remember phase 1 back in September the 8th. And then we built in to bring back pre-kindergarten through 2nd grade. Then we brought in 3rd through 6th grade. Then that phase 4 is the one that we started to pivot and adjust as necessary, and the board was supportive of that. So for phase 4 that affected grades 7 through 12, you see a reminder as to some of the things that we have done during this window of time. Now the 2nd and the 3rd bullet are the most recent summaries as to how the board supported our use of December the 17th and 18th for distance learning, and also how the board supported our request for January the 4th and January the 5th for distance learning for those days. If the staff were to give a chance to share with you their impressions, I think that the staff would agree. It gave us the opportunity to check on the wellness of our students, to get updates from our families, and of course find out about the wellness of our staff. Since this time of operations, it is no secret that School District 5 has had to make 2 adjustments. We had a closure at Chapin High School. We also had a closure at Irma Middle School, going from on-site instruction to distance learning. So with Chapin High School and Irma Middle School, I will say to you in my role, it gave us a chance to get better. The board gave us feedback because of things that they heard from the community from our first release of communications, and we adjusted that communications for the second, which happened to be Irma Middle School. And of course, looking through the lens of how we've operated since November the 9th, the board has sought updates, and I've given updates to the board and made requests when we have seen that we've reached places where we are uncertain. So when it comes to monitoring, of course, the board has supported back in November how you're going to support the idea of getting back to phase 5, which begins February the 1st. So the board did support that back in the November meeting on November the 16th, 2020. And then, of course, in December when the board met, there was support to begin a 10% metric as to how we are operating in School District 5. Now, I can tell you, with those experiences have come lessons, and I have shared those with the board, especially the board officers, of some things that we were looking at clarification for how I interpret those motions to make sure that I'm meeting the expectations of the board and to make sure that how we're operating is safe and well for our students and our staff. It's no secret that Wednesdays in School District 5 have been a day of advantage for our teachers, our 5 staff, for our students. You would hear anything from it gives our students a chance for catching up, to have extra help, to having mask breaks. And that may be surprising to some, but if you come and operate through a typical school day that our staff experiences and our students experience, it adds to it. And here I sit without a mask myself this evening for this portion because I thought it was more important for me to be able to articulate rather than to be muffled. So I say that with complete responsibility, but also as a disclaimer of this is the relevance of this conversation of how personal it can become. So where we are currently is working towards the phase 5 of 4K through 12th grade of having 5 days of on-site instruction. I understand that some people were, based on my inbox, and for those of you that may have emailed me in the last 3 or 4 days, I'm behind on email, but we are trying very hard to make sure, I am trying very hard to make sure that you get responses because I do answer my emails personally. That is not something I've asked Ms. Strange to do, and I will not ask Ms. Strange to do that. But because of that, there have been a lot of outreach asking for maintaining the Wednesdays because of the use of Wednesdays across School District 5. If Mr. Cann and Mr. Beanbo came to the microphone, they would share with you, we have a plan and we have had 100% of our facilities managers trained so that we can make sure that the cleaning that we have been using Wednesdays for will continue. Does that mean the next time I update the board that I'm going to say to you we've learned lessons and we need to adjust? It does not. Because I'm consistent to say to the staff, progression, not perfection. We are making progress, but we are not going to be perfect with our decisions. But it is clear that we have worked towards the expectations of the board with the motions passed in November and December. And this board has shown that when we have a recommendation, they're willing to call special call meetings so that I have the opportunity to present to this board where we are with our findings. Now, of course, February the 1st is a few days away. So as we're watching and monitoring, we are hopeful that we can continue. But based upon the metrics that we currently have, we would like to try the effort of 5 days face-to-face beginning February the 1st. And my request for you all this evening is to make sure that we have the conversation of clarity, that for the community and also for me to hear, Ms. Hammond continues to say that the superintendent is making the decisions with that 10% metric. And for the community to hear, there have been some that have done their own calculations to reach out to share with me and with us where we are with percentages. But it's not available information that people that calculate have the information they need to make those calculations. So there are things that we're dealing with that the general public would not understand. You may go down the hall and take attendance yourself as to who's where, but you don't know why that staff member is out necessarily because that's confidential information. So I would caution anyone from their own metrics and sharing where they believe math to be, because it's our responsibility through human resources to be confidential with staff absences. And I'd like to go on record once again to applaud our staff. The attendance policies that this board has passed and supported continues to be in effect. So our staff is putting in their leave as appropriate and continuing to make sure that they are abiding by that. Now, some may say, well, what's happening with operations? You can have a conversation of School District 5 is functioning versus School District 5 is operating. It is our expectation that we're operating effectively rather than functioning to be able to keep the doors open. Because we know that School District 5's success has been vested with a strong academic program because of the strong staff and our engaged students. So Ms. Hammond, I know that there's going to be questions from the board, but that's going to give an overview of where we are and where we're working towards. But of course, you know, at any moment, I may call you and say, Ms. Hammond, we need to have a conversation. I'm concerned. And that could be of phases such as this graph that captures of 7 through 12. It could be all students. It could be identified schools. It just depends on where we may be with operations to make sure that we are operating safely for our staff and also for our students.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. I realize that I just had a couple of things to say, and then I want to call on the board. There's no easy answer in the pandemic and the problems it's brought us. I'm proud of District 5 from the very beginning. Dr. Melton and her staff worked really hard. She has a reentry staff that meets, and in the beginning we gave the choice of virtual and we gave a choice of face-to-face, and as she said, that's changed as we have needed to change it. And I really want to say that this board, all 7 people on this board, care deeply. I mean, I've had conversations with all of you, and I really want to say how Dr. Melton and her staff and this board, I want to applaud this board because they have worked hard really to listen to all the people, and it's very divided. So I feel good about the fact the district has given Dr. Melton the ability to lead with a protocol or a parameter that she knows she can call us when she feels there's a need to change what we have planned. And continuity is important. Students, they've had to be so flexible, and parents have had, this is not an easy thing, and it's not easy around the whole country. So I appreciate you parents. We hear from you. I never even mind an irate email because I know you care, and I know that you're upset and you're worried. And so I just want you to put the faith and know this board is behind Dr. Melton as she has her ability to come to us when she worries that the safety or there's not enough staff, may not be the COVID cases, but not enough staff to have safety for our children. And I just wanted to make that statement. I want to thank her in public, how she's worked with her staff to ensure safety and education at the same time. And I want people to know that all of this board and Dr. Melton care deeply. Now, I'll take questions or statements for Dr. Melton.
I just wanted to make a statement that we've only had 2 officers' meetings, but in both of those meetings, Dr. Melton has brought us information, and it was, she asked for advice, and we fully backed what she said that we needed to do. We look at the situations, in regard to the parameters that she was given. And I think that, based on the numbers that she's given us, that she's making, heartfelt and important decisions that we backed. So we do look at this, and I wanted everybody to know that we're not just, we're not just sitting here. We're looking at it, we're studying it, and we're thinking about what can go on. Thank you.
Ms. Hines?
Dr. Melton, I have a couple of questions, and I can just ask one and then let the rest of the board ask questions if they don't ask what I have. But the first question is about, like you mentioned, we've gotten a lot of emails from parents and from teachers, and one of the things that I've had people reach out to me about several times, and I understand that there have been a lot of community conversations about a third option. Because you have students that are in 5 and 5 is full, so I know that there's a hardship process to get into 5, and it's really an unlikely option at this point because it is full. And then you have a large part of the community that wants to go back to school 5 days face-to-face, and then you have that middle ground where they felt like maybe at the time where they had to make the decision between 5 and a face-to-face structure, they felt safe at that time, and now they don't feel safe. or they have extenuating circumstances or family members that have issues. And so what's happening now is we're having folks reach out to us because they're concerned about attendance and truancy and safety and all of these things that happen when they've been quarantined multiple times. And so what they have suggested, you have folks that are suggesting instructional models, which we all know, we're not qualified to make those determinations about instructional models. But I do want to ask you about whether or not your staff has had conversations about a third option, what that looks like, whether or not students can live stream or operate and be marked virtually present via the quarantine procedures that we have at certain schools or all the schools, or if there's another option where if it just isn't feasible and you want to make the choice to not attend in person and understand that choice and those decisions are reflective on, you're making that choice or what have you. Are those conversations happening, and how would you respond to those parents and or teachers, because it has ramifications across the board?
Oh, yes, ma'am, it does.
So-
And I'll ask Mr. Giuliano to make his way to the microphone, and as he does, because the board has been involved in so many of these details, I don't know that our community has vetted and connected the dots along the timeline of things. So if we look back, of course, Government Master had challenged school districts to come up with a choice for families. School District 5 did that. Of course, School District 5 submitted its plan to the Department of Education. Superintendent Spearman approved our plan. That was back in July of 2020. And then, of course, we started to execute our choice process, allowing families. During that time, Mr. Giuliano and Dr. Harris have presented a variety of windows that have been open, allowing parents frames of time that they could change from one model to another. But you've heard us also talk about the need to create a consistent assignment for our staff and the ability for our students to build relationships with their teachers for their academic success. And of course, the board, the previous board, and this board I think would be true to say too, has been concerned about how we're asking teachers to teach in multiple instructional models. So we have worked very hard to make sure that there was a competitive academic program, but at the same time making sure that we were not overextending our staff, and did we have interested and willing staff to take on, in some situations, 2 models. Others have specialized in one and not both, because of course that makes it even more stressful for the staff. Mr. Giuliano, what would you like to add regarding the third option as far as the work that we've done with reentry and with the teams that you've worked with?
Thank you, Dr. Melton. Yes, we have had conversations with the different committees that we've received input from, and then also internal conversations within district level staff as well. So certainly a third option is, third scheduling model is an option that we could certainly explore if that's what the board would like us to do. Some of the concerns that we have with the third option is the amount of work it would put on our teachers and our staff to be able to then be required to do live streaming and to do in-person, because there is a difference there. It's going to require additional planning. It's certainly going to require them to be able to check in on those students that are being live streamed, either during class time or after class time, to be able to check in on those students, because live streaming is one way. So with that one-way communication, you need to be able to check in on those students that are home, that are being live streamed, to make sure that they're getting the content that they need. And so it will require more on our teachers and our staff. Other concerns that we certainly have heard is just being able to make sure that we monitor and take care and putting eyes on students, I should say. So to make sure that we know where students are, what exactly they're doing, to make sure that they are checking in, if they are picking this third option, that they are tuning in for each of their classes and not just tuning in for periods of classes, to make sure that we know where students are at all times. Certainly some families can stay home with their children, others cannot, so they're relying on their children to check in at particular times for their classes. And certainly our teachers would then be checking in to make sure if students are not attending, that they're communicating with parents to make sure that they are aware too. So really it becomes down to the increased workload for our teachers, and we certainly have heard concerns from the board previously about our teachers teaching both ways. So we've tried to limit that as much as possible and to try to make sure that our teachers are not doing that. There are certain circumstances for quarantines where some of our teachers are, Other teachers may be posting assignments during quarantines, so students can check in on those assignments, or giving work for our students to do during quarantines as well. So teachers are doing everything that they can to work with our students, but those are just a few of the concerns that we have just to make sure that our students are accounted for.
And Mr. Giuliano, if I could add to that, if Dr. Harris were at the microphone, he would share the South Carolina compulsory attendance laws are still in effect. So, Ms. Blackburn-Hines, I heard you ask about parents that are contacting board members with ideas and requests. I would encourage any family that is looking for a different option to talk directly with their school administrative teams. The families that have emailed me and I've connected them with their school principal or someone at the school administrative team, I can say to you all, unless something came through since I've gotten behind on email today and over the weekend, that there have not been follow-ups, that families did not feel heard and supported. I would encourage families to be very well versed with the hardship process. Although windows have closed, hardship is always available, and Dr. Harris, of course, is a key person for that. I'll look to Dr. Harris to see if there's any details you'd like to add to that, Dr. Harris, regarding hardship or compulsory attendance.
I would just simply echo you, Dr. Melton, that the South Carolina compulsory attendance law is still in effect, and it is both our students who are in 5 as well as those who are in our face-to-face model are to follow the compulsory attendance law. I understand that there have been several questions, so I do thank you for raising that question, that we might have an opportunity to write the record, if you will, with parents and those who are listening on to us today. And certainly our administrators in our schools are key persons who can walk parents through and answering those questions as it relates to attendance. As Dr. Melton indicated also, secondly, that there is a hardship process. We did have a window of opportunity whereby families could apply and ask for changes in the instructional model. That concluded, I think, the most recent, or the last, if you will, the last closing date was November 20th. So the hardship model has continued since then. We continue to receive those even as of today. I did hear something about in reference to 5 being closed. I would simply reiterate something that we've said in previous meetings, is that it is really contingent upon the space availability of in 5 as well as scheduling. That is something that's so very paramount and important that we review as we review students who are applying for hardship for 5. So those are the points I'd like to simply make, and obviously with everything that we do, there is an impact on our staffing that we would certainly want to always give consideration to as well.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Let me ask, and this may be Dr. Harris, I know you're about to sit down, but I'm sure Dr. Melton knows the answer. Are we, though, given any, with the quarantine, is there anything the State Department of Education has given us any leeway? You know, normally it's 10 days. After 10 days, you have to have a written excuse if you miss more than 10. Are they allowing us, when we know that a child had to get quarantined, it's not there, they may not even be sick, but they've got to stay home? Do those absences count, or if they've talked to their principal, do they not count? Is there any kind of leeway there?
Actually, there has been, and there's ample guidance for us monitoring as well as coding attendance. Okay. And so the short version of that is if they're in fact quarantined, or if there is a COVID case, then there is a code in which schools are to indicate that per student. And then there are subsequent codes that are appertaining to the status of a particular student. So yes, to answer your question, there is guidance on that when there are quarantine and isolations that occur.
And do our teachers get the same privilege? Let's say a teacher's told she has to stay home because she's been quarantined, like.
I'm going to yield to Dr. Turner to respond to in reference to staffing, so
Right.
you might have the most accurate information.
In other words, does that count against our teachers?
And some of that, Ms. Hammond, is going
It's
to come
gonna
up
be
later
in
on the
the
agenda
code.
if you wanted to do it now versus later, or not
No,
now
I
and
tell
then
you.
later. So I'll leave that up to you as to how you like to do that.
Dr. Turner, I tell you what we'll do. We'll wait, because we are going to discuss teachers and them, how we're going to count the COVID if they have to be out. I would just like to say from Ms. Hines' question and from your answer, as a teacher, I can assure you, even if, I know when there's a parent at home, there are very few that can be there to monitor and to be sure a child is staying home virtually. It really is very hard to monitor that, and teachers really are doing double duty when they have to do it both ways. We've done it. I mean, I teach 5 days a week now in Lexington too, and I have kids that are quarantined. I still send their work home. So I'm glad that was brought up tonight. The kids don't have to get behind, but I can assure you, especially middle schoolers, somebody needs to be behind them because, or they don't get all that work done. Ideally, you'd like them to. But I thought that was a really good answer, and I think your question was really good because I got that same question about us being creative, and, well, not us, but if Dr. Melton's staff could come up with a way. But I think that your answers were very thorough to understand the impact that it does put on a teacher. And I think they're doing so much right now, keeping masks on kids and keeping them 6 feet apart, and it added to just teaching. So I was glad to hear all that. Anybody, but you had it, all right, Matt, and then Mr. Hogan, and then I'll come to Hines.
Yeah, Dr. Melton, quick question, more pertaining to the elementary school. Is there a plan the district has to allow the teachers to have their planning periods back with getting the children back into PE, foreign language, special areas, activities, in order to give them the ability to prepare where they had that day prior to the Wednesday?
Yes, sir, and I'll ask Mr. Giuliano to come back to the microphone. And for context, for those that may not be aware, our specialists are going into classrooms, and so to reduce the mobility of students within the building, our physical education, art, music, world language teachers have gone into classrooms to prevent students from moving throughout the building. Mr. Giuliano, for an update for that.
So yes, to answer your question, Mr. Hogan, our teachers do have planning every day, our elementary teachers, but it is not necessarily in their classroom because the related areas teachers are using their classroom. So a lot of times they either have to have planning within their classroom with students there and a teacher teaching a lesson, or they have to go to a separate location in order to have their planning. To try to minimize the amount of movement within the school, our elementary principals have had conversations with our Director of Elementary Education, Ms. Tina McCaskill, about that specific topic that you bring up. And at this time, they're going to continue with the current practice of related areas moving to the classrooms, again, to minimize movement and try to reduce some of the quarantines that are taking place due to some of the close contacts. Not saying that's going to stay place for the remainder of the school year. That's going to be continual discussion with our elementary principals.
Thank you.
Ms. Hines?
So, to that point, how are we trying to help teachers, and Mr. Hogan referred to elementary school teachers, so I'm going to stay on that path. How are we trying to help them with their planning time, and especially since we are moving from a 4-day program to a 5-day schedule, what are we doing to help them with that planning? Because I know that there's a lot of concern that they just don't have time to breathe because they're starting school really early and they're going all the way through Carline, and there's just not a time where they can sit down and take their mask off and plan. So how are we weighing those pros and cons, and how are we addressing that issue?
Ms. Blackburn-Hines, planning unfortunately can be an issue any academic
Right.
year. And added to that, coverage has been more of a challenge this year. So when it comes to a teacher having an available planning period, because of the number of absences that we need to cover to continue to operate, many teachers have the scheduled planning period to have that time regardless of what they teach. But because they're available and we may need them to assist with the classroom, coverage and planning period is an issue in School District 5. And I would say it's probably one in most any other school district, but I'm not speaking for others, I'm speaking for us. I would applaud our principals' awareness. They have shared with executive staff members their efforts to monitor who they're asking to cover classes, to make sure that it isn't that one person that's agreeable and available when they need them, that there truly is a system in place to make sure that one person isn't being taken advantage of. And I say taken advantage of with air quotes to make sure that I'm not misunderstood with that. When it comes to a scheduled meeting, as team planning or individualized learning plans, IEP team meetings that we have, those things, of course, are of critical importance. We have to legally make sure the right people are in the place of having that conversation. So there are additional dynamics this year that are occurring that Mr. Giuliano could share with you some examples of what we're doing, but understand there's always the caveat of it depends. It depends on the number of absences. It depends on the activities in the school happening that day. It depends on the need of the team or the area of the department. Mr. G, what have I forgotten that you'd like to add?
I'll just add that both of you bring up great points, is that elementary teachers on a typical year have minimal planning time. When you think about the meetings that they have to attend and all the other responsibilities that they have. So in a typical year, I would argue that elementary teachers need more planning. So certainly this year as well, they need that additional planning, but like Dr. Melton said, oftentimes their requirements and responsibilities are to do other things as well to cover and everything else. So we're trying to find any possible time that we can offer to them to add increased planning time. So certainly as we move to 5 days, we're looking at having some of those early release days that we've had in the past. Those early release days are used so elementary teachers have those half days in the afternoon that they can plan. We have some professional development days that are built into our calendar. We're giving those afternoons back to our teachers so they can plan, not just at elementary, but at all of our levels. So we're trying to find other times that are built into the schedule when we can offer them additional planning, but quite honestly, no matter what we can offer, it's probably not going to be enough. Our teachers continue to work very, very hard, and the amount of work that they're doing this year is beyond what they typically do anyway. So our teachers are amazing, and I need to make sure I say that, because they have been doing a tremendous job this year. But anytime we can try to find additional planning time for them, we're trying to work that into the calendar.
Thank you. Mr. White?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the comment I was making earlier that, you know, what I've heard is, you know, we've kind of got three groups of constituents and families and students and teachers, and the people that are in virtual seem to be satisfied with that. The people that want 5-day face-to-face are happy that this is now coming to fruition. And the people, you know, some of the comments we're seeing is the people that are in hybrid feel like they don't have a choice anymore, and had they known, you know, some of the comments, you know, they known where we were going to end up, they would have never started where they did. And the common theme that I see over and over from the group in the middle about the discomfort with taking away that Wednesday cleaning day, is safety, you know, et cetera. So what do you say to the people that have a concern with the decision that Wednesday will no longer be a cleaning day or a break day in terms of moving forward and reassuring people that this is something that the district feels is a workable progress, as you described it earlier?
Well, first, I would applaud that person for reaching out to have a conversation with us, because when you reach out to talk with us, and by us, I would mean school administrators, district administrators, that gives us a chance to form relationships. You know, those that may have opinions that they post on social media, are you looking for a statement, or are you looking for a conversation? So I applaud those that are reaching out with emails, asking, trying to engage in a conversation, because that's where we can make sure that the processes Dr. Harris described are understood rather than heard. Because the more time we spend with conversations, the better we can prepare. For the group that may be in, regardless which of the three you may prefer, I've been reminded since March of last year that decisions are popular with those that agree. I'm not sure if that's a trademark quote, but I would like to go on record that I need to earn that quote. Decisions are popular with those that agree.
I like it.
So I hope that we can agree, regardless which of the three models, as Mr. White has described, that we are trying in School District 5 to focus on achievement, academics, operations, support of teachers, and wellness of all involved. I don't know if you all are aware, but we have not had a 5-day week of instruction since March the 2nd, 2020.
I'm aware.
March the 2nd, 2020. The week of March the 9th, we had a student holiday on that Friday that was scheduled and approved by the board. And then we were closed by executive order on Sunday, March the 15th. So that brings a sense of reality, because graduation is nearing for our seniors. On the opposite end of that, for our earliest learners, the more time we miss with them, because as Mr. Giuliano said, I would argue, and I hate that I'm using the word argue because that sounds like I'm argumentative, but I would state that our children are better when they are interacting with our teachers. I've had the fortune to visit classrooms and interact with students that may not send emails, that may not participate with surveys, but they will tell you what they think, especially when they find out my position. And they have told me, we don't like to log in from home. So I said to them, because I know how to be that teacher and that administrator, well, we'll turn your cameras on. Don't turn my camera on, they'll say. Well, if you're not engaged, we need to help you get engaged. So I applaud our teachers for the creative things that they're doing to make sure that there is engagement. Our positive intervention system looks completely different this year because we know that we've got to have a different level of a motivation and engagement for our students to be involved. So, Mr. White, for that group that may feel that they're not being heard, I would encourage them, talk to your school administrators. Make sure that you have a request on file, because just as there are students that are requesting to go to 5 model, there are students requesting to come back to on-site instruction. So as those seats become available, Dr. Harris and his team are monitoring and reaching out to those families to see, would you like to fill this in? Because as Dr. Harris described, it's also schedule available. So a parent may say, no, we want to keep the schedule we currently have. We don't care to make a change. So that parent may forego, but say, keep me on the list so that if something else becomes available that fits my child's schedule. So Dr. Harris is doing those kinds of things. And I don't know if those kinds of success stories are being shared, but that's how personal our staff is trying to make this, that isn't known unless the family allows us to have a conversation. All that, did that answer any what you asked me?
Well, I think it helps, but I think the real question is, the people that are saying when you dispense with Wednesday cleaning, what does that mean to
Right.
the say? I mean, that's a difference between being heard.
Yes.
And are you able, what can you say to those people to reassure them
Yes.
that dispensing with Wednesday cleaning is still appropriate given the progress that I think you're saying you're making? I mean, that's the real issue. People are saying the Wednesday cleaning is
Yes.
what? I mean, I don't have any more to say on that. other than
Wednesday
just where do y'all
cleaning
feel about that?
is definitely an issue, and Mr. Cannon and Mr. Beatonbow, I can report that 100% of facilities supervisors have been trained, and I can also share with you that our teachers are being given timeframes of when they need to exit their classrooms, because we know that many teachers work late because that gives them a chance to work in their rooms, but we're asking them, and we've given them times that we need them out of the buildings in the afternoons of Monday through Friday to make sure that our staff has access. Dr. Turner and her HR team have worked with principals and supervisors to make sure how we need to flex schedules to get facilities, staff in place, that we're working with that, so that we don't have people in the building during the day when we may need more in the evenings or at certain times in the day. So I would say that we are not having a dedicated day of Wednesdays for cleaning, but we have confidence in the plan that we've created. But I would also add, I may come back to you with a special call meeting request and say, this Wednesday plan is not as successful as we had hoped. So I'm not going to profess it's going to be perfect, but I can say to you that we do expect progression.
Can I make one quick comment? And I know
If it's
Rebecca's
quick, Mr.
gonna
White.
have- The other thing I'd ask the board officers and the superintendent is, I think this needs to be a regular updated every single meeting. I mean, this is top of mind of everybody, and we shouldn't have a single meeting this year that this isn't a discussion of at least where Dr. Melton's assessment is, given what's going on in the schools.
Mr. White, I totally agree with you. Okay, how about, I see a hand.
Sorry.
We're all so far apart. It used to be before COVID, we were closer. I could find you.
Okay, so my next question is kind of to a point that Dr. Melton stated. I don't know if Dr. Melton needs to answer this, or if maybe the board needs to have a discussion on this, but I know Dr. Melton mentioned some clarification on that 10% threshold in the motion that the board passed last time. I will say I'm saying this because I know we've had 2 situations where we've had 2 schools that have had to close. Kind of on point to that, those decisions were made later in the afternoon. I don't want to say luckily or unluckily that it was a high school and a middle school. So middle schoolers and high schoolers, parents have a little bit more flexibility to when you have to shut down a school at 8 o'clock at night, versus if an elementary school has to make that decision, and what parents do with elementary school children. My question is, it kind of relates to that in the sense of, is there a time frame that we should put as a board, or that Dr. Melton thinks that we should put, or what the train of thought of when we announce those closures on those days? Those days where we had to close those schools, it only affected one day, which was good, and the schools were actually closed. My question is, in my opinion, that motion gave Dr. Melton the ability to make a decision on that model, that reentry model, and that she had the discretion to either close the school and go virtual, or make the discretion, she had the decision, or had the discretion to make the decision to go virtual, hybrid, or to completely shut the school down, if that makes sense. So my question is,
Yeah.
can we clarify that motion? Does Dr. Melton need clarification on that motion? And when we make those decisions, when we have to make those decisions to completely shut down a school, how do we go about determining when it's too late to make that decision? I'm just curious.
Before you answer that, I would just like to take up for you in the sense that I think
That was
when we're
not a
trying
dig
to.
on you.
No, I know you're not picking on, but I just want to say this because I understand this as a teacher. You're trying to keep them in school as much as you can and still follow that. So I don't know that she has to do it as soon as she gets the data. So I don't think we need to put her into some pigeonhole of it's got to be done sooner, because she can't do it till she has the
Please.
facts.
That was
Because we
not
want
my
our kids in
intention at
school.
all.
Okay.
Well,
I try to take up
I
for you.
didn't take it
Please
that
know
way,
that
Ms.
was not my
Blackburn Hines.
intention to say I'm just curious as to how those decisions happen.
Well, I did not take it that way, Ms. Blackburn Hines, but I will tell you, I've had my hair colored more in the last 12 months than I have
What I mean.
in the last 12 years.
Same.
So that is real. And that's not because of creative expression, that's because of my tinseling that I have happening, but that's what my stylist calls it, it's tinseling.
I
But-
think you've done great.
Thanks, Ms. Hammond. When I look at the motion, I heard two pieces with that. Make sure that you hold me accountable for those two. As a staff, we're monitoring throughout the day. I don't know when Dr. Turner ever turns her phone off, because I am concerned about the hours that she and her staff are putting in, because when we have employees put in an absence at 10 o'clock at night, that may affect a decision for the next morning. Ms. Goggins, if she were here, she would describe for you that we're mindful of the local news, of what time we need to have information to them so that they can assist us with getting out. And then, of course, the idea of when is it too late to send an alert to families. So if the board were to share times that I've sent you all text messages to give you a heads up that, I'm watching this, I'm concerned about this or that, I'll let you know. And there have been situations where probably less than 10 minutes later, I've sent you an update that we've had to make a call, or not, because of how things have happened. So in an ideal world, it would be before 5 p.m. because that's when the district office staff has finished their work hours in their office, and I say that with air quotes. Of course, our school hours are different. Our elementary students leave earlier than our high school students. So in an ideal world, it would be before our teachers went home so that they would know, it would be before our teachers exited the day and before our students left their campus, so that they could be properly prepared for success of distance learning the next day in an ideal world. But because this is real live data that's occurring, unfortunately, I can't say. But I can tell you, if Mr. Wiseman were here, we have to make decisions for buses operating, and the last thing we want to do is to get students on buses and have to turn them around and send them back home. I can tell you, whenever we've made decisions regarding closure, Mr. Wiseman's made sure that there were not students that were left at a bus stop. We have made sure that people have checked that students received that notification, and principals have had staff receiving students to make sure that families heard. So I don't know that I could encourage you to say expect something by 6 p.m. because I just don't know that we can achieve that. That would be ideal, if 6 p.m. or sooner. The second piece of that is it would assist me to have clarity of when I look at the motion that Mr. Hogan made that was supported. I'm reading that as number 9 on the minutes. I don't know that that means that we can shift to hybrid. And if it is 9 o'clock in the evening, we make an announcement for the next day, we would not have a chance to reset for hybrid the next day. But if we did see that we had a distance learning day, and I'll make this up as a scenario, today's Monday. If we need a distance learning on Tuesday, we would have distance learning on Tuesday, and then we could initiate hybrid to follow. But I do not think that we could successfully create hybrid options in a quick turnaround because our students would be confused, our families would be confused, and our staff could be confused, and that would not be successful for any of us. So if this does include a hybrid option, or if it's distance learning, or if it is on-site, that would help me with clarification, just to make sure that I execute the expectations of the board.
Right, so to me, for what my understanding of the motion was, if we had to shift a model and it lasted for more than one day, and it was gonna go, you noticed that the quarantines or the positives or the percentage was gonna last throughout a week or longer, but hopefully that is not the case, and we haven't had that case, that if you had the decision to make it a hybrid decision versus an all virtual decision, if it was appropriate, that's what the intent of that motion was to allow. Not to create a havoc of, one day of a hybrid where it affected half of the students and not the other half. And I would ask my fellow, board members if that's what they thought as well.
Well, in clarity of that, my understanding, Dr. Melton, would be you would lead us where you want that to go if it needs to close.
Exactly.
And you would come, that was my assumption. Now, Mr. Hogan, since you made that, would you like to?
No, and I can confirm, the intent of that motion was, Dr. Melton, to give you the authority and the ability to act on your accord with your staff, what you guys feel is necessary for the safety and the well-being of our students, teachers, and staff.
And to that point, you're the one that's looking at your data, and, so far you've had like one school and then another school, and you even had one school where you made the decision with your principal that it didn't need to be closed. And so if you would see 10 schools went overnight, surely you should have the leeway to tell us exactly what you think we need to do. So if the board agrees with that, there's no need, that can be understood in that motion.
And I think that's what Dr. Melton wanted to
Okay,
make sure.
is that good, Dr. Melton?
That's
You
very
feel good?
helpful, and just for I don't want to make an assumption, but
Right.
depending on the situation and where staff may be going into quarantine or where the numbers may be
Right.
coming in, that may be more than a one-day scenario that I would then communicate to the
That
board.
to
Okay.
us, yes. Thank you. Okay, I think that was good. Did everybody get to say what they needed to? All right, let's move forward. Keep me straight, parliamentarian over there.
Ms.
Okay,
Hammond, that completes the superintendent's report.
Thank you.